to Thursday night, Be Your Own Bank Movement, Talk with the Finance Doctor, Prime Time. Let me begin by wishing everyone on this call a wonderful Thursday evening. And let me also give a spiritual shout out of health and wellness to our own trade whisperer. We know that she is a woman of courage, a woman of conviction, a woman of accomplishment. And so the next accomplishment on her mighty list is simply that she will be whole, she will be well, and she will be in perfect health. This we declare right now. So, welcome to a talk with the finance doctor. I appreciate everyone giving your affirmations and starting this call off right by affirming who you are. I see Jacksonville is in the house, Minnesota is in the house, Miramar, Florida. I used to live in Pompano Beach years ago. Orlando in the house. Cleveland also in the house. Good to see you, Cleveland. And multiple Clevelanders. Milwaukee in the house. How about those Bucks? 50 years in between. Jubilee, Mr. Rogers. I heard about you. So, welcome everyone to a talk with the finance doctor, Prime Time. So let's jump right in. Mr. Rogers, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, the voyage continues. I'm in the airport. We flying to the East Coast, about to drop some things in Greenville, South Carolina.
Love it.
BYOB worldwide. So I'm on location. I wanted to see what it feel like to be like you, Dr. Mike, to be on location in the airport.
Got a broadcast from location. and when you get to Greenville, certain people are not going to let you help coach that football team. So just understand, they may let you stand on the sideline, but that's it. So welcome everyone to a talk with the finance doctor, your RX for Forex, and let's also provide traveling grace to our visionary as he travels to Greenville, South Carolina to continue to send this message of wealth, abundance, and learning this skill set. So for those of you who may be new to who we are and what we do, a talk with the finance doctor is a little bit different than every other call that we do, because every other call that we do is chart-based. And in a chart-based environment, it makes sense that the questions are going to be typed in the chat because that allows us to focus on the chart. But in this particular situation, we are having a talk with the finance doctor, which means that if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have a testimony, what you do in this environment is you make that diagonal red line on the bottom left-hand side of your Zoom video, you make it disappear. We actually had an entire call a year ago that was about walking in the power of the unmuted microphone. So on this call, if you have a question, you please signify by speaking. And here's the benefit of that. What happens in this situation is that with a conversation like this, there's tonality, there's inflection, there's a theme associated with the way you ask a question. And when you do it that way, the answer and the give and take that comes from that literally creates value. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today, and they were talking about the fact that they went to an event and really enjoyed the event, and they enjoyed watching other people enjoy the event. So I explained to that person that, well, that's what we call the collective consciousness, meaning that we all have our own consciousness. But when we are in the presence of others, their energies begin to attract one another and those energies begin to align. That's why sometimes someone on this call will ask a question and then somebody in the chat will say, oh my God, I had the same question. That's the same reason why you may be in a classroom and you ask someone asks a question and you're thinking to yourself, I wondered the same thing. The energies begin to match and then begin to bounce off of each other wherever you're in a room. So the collective consciousness shows itself when we begin to have dialogue like that. So when the visionary created this call, he specifically chose the preposition with on purpose. This is a talk with the finance doctor. And one of the reasons why that's so important is because we recognize that this statement that I will say every single call, personal finance, BYOB movers, is the only area of our society where the individuals that provide you information about the product just happen to be the same individuals that sell you the product. And so you should probably be able to easily see that that can provide a disincentive for them to give you a slant or a presentation of the information that is going to be objective. It's going to be designed toward you getting what you want. I used to use this example constantly. I'll use it again. And that is that if you wanted to know about the dangers of crack, the last person you talk to would be a crack dealer, because any conversation that they have about the dangers would specifically and indirectly provide an impact adversely to their bottom line. So we're okay with that. We're not upset with it. Whatever you choose to deal is okay. The point is that when we're dealing with these institutional dealers, when we're dealing with these legal dealers, we need to understand that they're going to present the information in a way beneficial to the organization's bottom line as opposed to your household bottom line. So another comment that I've been making for almost 3 decades, I am not anti-institution, I'm pro-household. So we welcome a situation like this. We have the opportunity to be able to dialogue, to be able to talk about it, to be able to ask questions that can benefit your life. And the other benefit of this is we've been doing this for a number of years. So we have created a nice library of specific data that talks about specific things. So when you go on your BYOB Challenge YouTube channel, you have the opportunity to go back and hear some really strong trainings from Ms. Dyer and also our new next generation trainers. And then you can get some specific subject matters addressed on prior a talk with the finance doctors. So having said all that, let me now ask this question. Are there any questions, comments, or testimonies? Questions, comments, testimonies. Now, as I begin talking, because trust me, I will always come to this call with an agenda. And that does not mean that I always come to this call prepared. What that means is I've been preparing myself for 54 years. 54 is the new 24, with every single situation I have encountered, every single book I've read, every single study that I've analyzed, every single consulting opportunity I've had has led to this moment. Because I know that I ask God every single day to give me opportunities to heal the planet, give me opportunities to touch people, give me opportunities to be able to pour into people's lives, enlarge my territory. I ask it every single day. So every time we have a conversation like this, there will always be information that's ready to be poured out. However, I feel very strongly, hello, Chicago and Columbus, Ohio, I feel very strongly that your questions are designated to what can impact your household. So I said all that to say this. As I begin talking, if anybody decides that they have a question, it pops into your head, it divinely downloads, please interrupt me. The worst thing I hear people say is, I had a question, but I didn't want to interrupt you. That's not the purpose of this call. This is a talk with the finance doctor rather than a talk from the finance doctor. So that means anytime you have a question, even if I'm in the middle of a thought, interrupt me. If the thought is supposed to be delivered, it will be delivered. So let me say this one more time before I jump into my agenda. Questions, comments, testimonies for a talk with the finance doctor.
Great evening, Dr. Bythwood. I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk about the Gleason credit report?
You always ask those kind of questions, Ms. Brownlee. So give me some background on the Gleason part of the Gleason report, so I can make sure I give you the right answer.
Okay, no, I just heard about it for the first time, I think yesterday, and that I was told that the report most people do not know about, and generally they will check the other 3 credit bureaus, but the Gleason report only reports like if you're buying at Tiffany or Lexus and those things. And many times that's what determines whether you get the loan or the purchase that you want. And that's something that most of us don't know anything about. Like I say, I had never even heard of it. And maybe I should have done my homework, but I thought my best thing was to ask you, because you know everything about
That's
finance.
exactly what you were
Thank you.
supposed to do, Ms. Brownlee. So I think a conversation about the Gleason report, we should start and give a little background on the 3 reports that you and I always hear about. Now, I've been talking about the credit reports for quite a while. And just a quick background for those of you who may be new. My PhD is in finance and economics, and I earned it in 1994 when I was 26. And one of the things I started doing when I was doing my dissertation on banks is I began to do some research on the entire banking industry. And one of the things I found out, which I found extremely interesting at that time, was that the entire credit rating industry and the entire credit card industry, and watch this, the entire credit counseling industry were all set up by banks. So the entire system is all set up in a way to put you in a position where every part of the information is controlled by them. Now, before we get into the Gleason part, let's just really think about this for a second. There are 3 credit rating agencies. And credit rating agencies, which I'm sure you've experienced by now, are very aggressive with putting information on your credit report, whether or not it's yours. I'll give you a quick example. My name is Craig Bythewood, and my ex-stepfather's name was Collins. So there's several Craig Collins around the world. And so anytime Craig Collins does anything, it goes on my credit report. Now watch this. Based on the way the credit ratings are set up, the credit rating agencies are set up, what if you have a discrepancy? Can you call them? No, there are no phone numbers. Can you write them a letter? No, there's no address. What you can do is fax them. And when you fax them, then they may or may not get back in touch with you, simply because, how do I know that? As a financial planner, I've had several people who have had credit rating issues, and on their behalf, I will make an effort to contact them. So all I'm trying to get you to see is this. We have 3 credit rating agencies that are uncontactable. And the information that is on those agencies, or the information that comes from those agencies, affects your score. And your score, the lower it is going to affect the interest rate that you pay to the bank. We talked about banks being gangster on Tuesday. I didn't say that, one of you said it. So think about this for a second. We have an uncontactable set of agencies that have 3 different sets of information that are aggressive to put things on there, whether they're yours or not, and they are very slow to respond to anything that's going on. Would that allow our scores to be high, or would that allow our scores to be low? Of course, it would over time have us have lower scores. And if we have lower scores, then what does that do to our ability to be able to get loans? Or better yet, what does that do to our ability to pay when we get loans? It makes the rates that we pay higher. So all I'm saying to you, Ms. Brownlee, is that it's all put together. And that credit counseling thing, that really blew me away. Because when credit counseling first came out in the early 90s, my first thought was, oh, how cool is that these companies are interested in helping people to manage their debt. But in reality, these credit counseling agencies were literally financed and set up by banks. Here's why. Every single bank has a line item on their financial statement that's called bad debt expense. So if you owe a bank money, let's pause for a second. Banks and credit card companies are the same people. Banks and credit card companies are the same people. Well, what? Visa and MasterCard aren't banks. They aren't. But Visa and MasterCard are not credit cards. Visa and MasterCard are credit processors. If you take out every single credit card in your wallet, there's a bank associated with it. It could be your bank. It could be Merrick Bank. It could be Citibank. It could be what's in your wallet. Capital One. These are all banks. So understand that there is no distinction between credit card companies and banks. They're the same individuals. And each particular credit card is issued by a particular bank. So I said all that to say this. If you have relationships with banks and you don't pay, if you have relationship with credit cards and you don't pay, then the bank writes that off as something called bad debt expense. Well, at a certain point in the late 90s, credit became such a big issue and people started having such large amounts of credit that banks started having their bad debt expense go up. So when the bad debt expense began to go up, they said, we need to find a way to keep individuals from getting out of debt. I still want them in debt, but I still want them to be able to pay. So the banks invented credit counseling as a way to allow you to get from being underwater, but still being in the water. So I said all that just to say this. These are the, as you mentioned, Ms. Brownlee, the credit reports that we hear about, the ones that are common. Whereas this Gleason report, and I think we should really think about this. So you have a report that specializes in high luxury abundant items and we don't know about it. That right there is proof positive of why the Be Your Own Bank movement is so important. Why it's so important that we understand this skill set. Why it's so important that we put our energy into 6 figures in 6 months. Why it's so important that we put ourselves in a position to expose people to this. Because as we raise our level of abundance, now there are certain situations that were not relevant to us before, but will be relevant now. So I'm really glad you brought that up because it is a perfect lead in to what I'm going to say after all the questions are answered. So bottom line, Ms. Brownlee, I have very little exposure to that, just like you. But I do know that it's exactly what you just said. It is something that comes into play when you're operating on a higher level. So since you and I are on a trajectory to operate on a higher level, in fact, I'm sorry, we're operating on a higher level right now. So based on that, the Gleason report will be more relevant to what we're doing. Does that answer your question, Ms. Brown?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Now I'm going to go a little bit deeper. I hadn't planned on this, but because I brought this up, I want to go a little bit deeper on the way in which credit ratings operate. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to merge it into the IRS. Why are you merging it into the IRS? I'm merging it into the IRS because there are 2 similarities between credit rating agencies and the IRS. And the similarity is this: fear. The similarity is this: fear. I believe I mentioned on Tuesday that I was dealing with a consulting partner and their secretary decided they didn't want to participate in what we were doing because someone said that we may have to testify in front of the IRS. And just to make this simple, it's simply do something called a conservation easement, which simply means you take a piece of land and you decide that you want to use this land for a business purpose. And if you can do that and say that you're conserving some type of natural resource, then the IRS gives you tax benefits. Simple as that. So obviously, you know how we are as a society. When people know they can get tax benefits, sometimes they're aggressive. So there's some people around the nation who took these conservation easements and used it on pieces of land that should not have been, just so that they could reap the tax benefits. So the IRS is very meticulous about making sure you cross your T's and dot your I's. So I said all that to say this: when the young lady who's simply a processor, she was a secretary type of situation, and whenever we would process paperwork, she would, type it, or she would make copies or do anything like that. She refused to participate in this because someone mentioned the IRS and what I just said. Now think about that. This is a woman who's paid per hour, the old world that we used to live in. And this person that's paid by hour decided they did not want to participate at all just because of the fear of having to testify in front of the IRS. So I've always found it amazing that the IRS and the credit rating agencies make us scared. And because we're scared, then we take certain actions based on the fear. Let me give you an example. I have this conversation with teenagers all the time. So a teenager will see the way in which their peers are abusing credit cards. A teenager will be given a stat that the #1 target market for credit cards is high school students. When I first started teaching this, the #1 target market for credit cards was college students. So now you think about it. I'm targeting individuals that do not have income. I'm targeting individuals that do not have the ability to pay, but I know that if I can get them at a lower rate, or excuse me, at a lower age, there's a higher chance that I have a customer for life. And if I could just give an addition to that, when I first started doing financial planning, the average credit card balance for an American citizen 18 and over was $40,000. That's $40,000 in credit card debt. So I'm simply saying that the situation that we're talking about is real. Now, some of these teenagers would feel like they don't want to get caught into that. But then they try to do something where they need financing, and then they're told, well, you don't have established credit. So if you don't have credit, then we're not going to be able to extend you credit. So you see that balance there? If I use credit cards and I pay it off every month, you tell me I'm not utilizing the credit. But if I don't have credit, then I'm not able to extend myself financially. So there's that balance where you may not even want to participate, but you have to participate to do certain things that you would do in a non-BYOB world. So I said all that to say this. In both of those situations, it's fear. There's fear. And I remember using this analogy in a financial planning seminar some years ago. I was trying to court this young lady. Am I allowed to talk about courting? Of course I am. So I was a young man and I was attempting to court this particular young lady. Am I allowed to say court? Can I say that in 2021? Yes. So I wanted to court this young lady. So for the young people, that means I was trying to holler. I was trying to holler. So I was courting this young lady and she said, did I want to hang out on Sundays after church? And I said, of course. So I hung out with her on Sundays after church and she had this particular practice that she liked to participate in. And it was called watching Lifetime movies. So I'm trying to court. So when she says, do you like Lifetime movies? You know what I said? I said, of course I like Lifetime movies. So when they get the high voice ladies, that's when you know. So I said, of course I like Lifetime movies. And I began to watch Lifetime movies with this young lady every Sunday afternoon because I got the high voice and said, of course I like Lifetime movies. Now, when I was watching Lifetime movies, I began to realize that there was a pattern. And this pattern was very interesting to me because I've been a finance doctor all my life. Before the term, I was already operating in that vein of how can I take the information and apply it to the world so that I can help people understand what's going on in this economic society. So as I'm watching these Lifetime movies, this is what I noticed. I noticed that almost every movie was the same. There would be a man in the movie and he was a bad fella. He had a bad attitude. He was dangerous. He was abusive. He was verbally abusive and sometimes physically abusive. So in the beginning of the movie, he would always come and he would do and say things to the young lady to make her feel uncomfortable. And in many of those movies, she would take her child and she would run and she would find a new life and she would do whatever she could to get away from this man. Now, in the second half of every one of these Lifetime movies, every move she made, she would think about the man. There would be a noise. Is that him? She'd be at the store and the music would play. Dun, 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 and she'd look, is that him? And it's so interesting because the man never even came up in the second half of the movie. He was never even there. He never even reappeared. because all of the movies end alike. She finds herself and she's empowered and the sun's shining and she walks into on the beach with her barefoot and her daughter is there or her son is there and she has a happy life because she finally escaped this evil man and they all end the same. But here's my point. At the end of the movie, the evil man is never there. He's never present. She got away from him. But the threat of him is always there. The impact of him possibly being there is always there. And as I sat there trying to court this young lady, watching these Lifetime movies, I love Lifetime movies. I began to see that these Lifetime movies were just like the IRS, just like the credit rating agencies. We take action. We don't take action based on the fear, based on being afraid. This young lady literally made the decision not to participate in the administration of this consulting opportunity because she was afraid she'd have to testify in front of the IRS. So there's so many, thank you for that. There's so many financial and economic institutions that take no action. But because we're afraid of what action they'll take, then we take action based on that. Well, I would do this, but it'll mess up my credit. Well, I would not do this, but then I won't have credit. Oh, let me say it again. Well, I would do this, but it'll mess up my credit. Oh, but I would not do this, but then I won't have credit. So you see how we have that balance of not taking action that we think is wise, not doing what's best for us, but instead the fear, is that him? Is he there? That isn't their Lifetime movie experience. So I thank that young lady, even though I was unsuccessful in courting her. I thank her for that experience because you have been able to be blessed tonight. She wasn't all that cute anyway. I'm lying. She was real pretty. So finance doctor plays too much. So the bottom line is the Lifetime movie analogy is being stated to you tonight to make you think this. One of the things that we're doing with this skill set, one of the things we're doing in the BYOB movement is we're developing our swag. We're developing our swag to be able to make financial decisions based on what's best for us, not how an external institution is going to respond to what we do. Because when you make good decisions from a financial perspective, when you make decisions based on truth and justice, as it says in the self-confidence formula of Think and Grow Rich, then you're always in the right position. So rather than make decisions based on your fear of the implication of an institution, make the decision that you feel comfortable with. Make the decision that matches with your intuition. So I want to pause on purpose because I threw a lot out at you just then. And I want to ask if there are any questions, comments, testimonies about this credit issue and this analogy. And thank you very much, Ms.
Hi.
Yes.
I have a question or a statement.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm sorry, I'm Patty Harrison from
Patty
Cleveland,
Harrison. Where are you calling from?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland. All right, what can I do for you?
Okay, if a person wants to become debt-free, but yet and still we have this hanging over our heads, not having credit, you can't do anything. Having credit and staying out of debt. What is the solution?
That's a really good question, Miss Patty. And I first of all want to acknowledge to everyone listening that the way she asked the question reinforces my Lifetime movie analogy. It was corny. You were like, where is he going with this? Why is he in the high voice? Why did he call that girl not cute when she was pretty? You were saying all of that. But the way she asked it proves that that's the way we are. We're afraid of what could happen. So the first answer to your question is this. The solution is to understand that you should do and make financial decisions based on what you feel comfortable doing from an intuitive perspective. So if I feel like I would like to take on this particular financial scenario and do it this way, and I feel intuitively comfortable with it, then I should do it, regardless of what the institution says. And think about it, there are various institutions involved. It could be the credit rating agency. It could be the institution that's providing the money. It could be the institution that's selling the product. So they all have their own agenda, and they're going to say things in a certain way. But I am very, very strong about this. Yes, I'm the finance doctor. And yes, I can give you all the specific variables, but it's not about the variables. It's about how you feel. It is, you always know what is right for you. You always know the best way to approach a situation. So always go with your heart rather than the fear-based and the fear-based scenario. Now, my second answer and more important answer is this. I love having financial and economic conversations about things that are going to be irrelevant. Let me say it again. I love having financial and economic situations that are going to be irrelevant. Because the reason why you and I are in debt is because we have a system that provides a certain level of income based on the old school institutional scenario of the boss or the owner hiring you in a way. I heard Ms. Dyer say this recently, that your boss is never going to pay you enough to be their neighbor. So based on this level of income and based on this level of desire, there's a gap. And in order for us to fill that gap, guess what we have to do? We have to use debt in order to fill that gap. So you're asking a question, Ms. Patty, but you're also asking a question that doesn't matter. Because what you and I are doing is learning a skill set. And this skill set will allow us to have a level of wealth and income. We don't have to ask whether or not we should do this or that. How do I get debt free? I'm debt free because the amount of money that I'm able to earn by developing this skill set. And like we say all the time, you only have to learn it once. And once you learn it and it is yours and you continue to compound the amount, just think about, everybody close your eyes for a second. Do it. One of you didn't do it. One of y'all are watching the Olympics. It'll be on when we finish. Close your eyes. Now, right now, I want you to think about the amount of debt you have. Don't say it. Just think about it. Just see the number. I'm not sure. Just think of a number. Whatever number comes into your heart, that's the right number. Now, see the number that you have of debt. Okay, got it. Now, everybody that has just now seen that number in your mind, I want you to see visually the chart that Ms. Anderson did on either Tuesday night's beginning training or any other prior beginning training you've been on. I want you to literally look at that chart. See the chart, see her going through the different numbers, see her taking a certain amount out in 6 months, see what she has after a year. Now, in this moment, as you're looking at that chart, everybody should know to keep your eyes closed. Everybody should notice this truth. The numbers on that compounding sheet are larger than the number you just had in your mind for your total number of debt. So I don't have to walk in this normal person, pre-BYOB cash out strategy situation. I'm saying, well, what do we do? What's the solution? We already have the solution, because I know for a fact that the numbers that you're looking at right now are larger than the numbers I made you look at first. So understanding that and putting ourselves in that perspective allows us to release the chains, allows us to take ourselves out of the Lifetime movie. We don't have to have that pressure. This is why I like when you ask questions, because Ms. Patty's very good question had a little bit of angst to it. But what do we do? Well, how do we do it? We're already doing it. We're already operating in a compounding in mechanism that is higher than our compounding out mechanism of debt. So that is a question that is very legitimate, but it's based on the old model. The new model is where we're going right now. Open your eyes. Thank you, Ms. Patty, so much for bringing that up. What a wonderful question. Yes, ma'am?
I said, thank you.
You are welcome. Any other questions, comments, testimonies? Any other questions, comments, testimonies? Now, one of the things that I'd like for us to think about is this. I want you to think about the fact that when we're talking about this fear-based experience, excuse me, we're talking about the fact that there are many institutions in our society, as the IRS and as the credit agencies, that set things up in a way for us to operate in fear. What we want to do is we want to make sure that two things. Number one, that we operate in our intuitive mind, like I just said. Albert Einstein said this. Albert Einstein said, the intellectual mind is a servant. The intuitive mind is a gift. Let me say that again. The intellectual mind is a servant. The intuitive mind is a gift. We live in a society that honors the servant and ignores the gift. My daughter, who's 16, I have 3 teenage daughters. My 16-year-old daughter had my vehicle. And while she was driving, she got a flat tire. So when she got the flat tire, it started making a noise, and she immediately turned around and she came back home and parked the car before there could be any major damage to the tire. And when she told me about it, this is what she said. She said, Dad, something told me that the tire was about to blow. And you know, I had to get her something. Something told you, and she hit me with, this is all via text. She hit me with the LOL. Okay, God, exactly. It's so funny how we say something told me as if we don't recognize the power that is inside of us to be able to recognize things beyond what our conscious mind does. Now, here's part 2 to that story. When she made the decision to turn around and come back, she was on the phone with a friend. And when she was on the phone with the friend could hear everything that was going. My daughter said this, and I'm going to go ahead and compliment myself because this really made me feel good. She said, at first, I started to panic. But then I thought, what would my dad do? And she began to calm herself down, and she said this to the car, move faster. And she said, when she said car move faster, it did. And the person on the phone went and told some of their friends, like, do you believe that Nielle was on the phone? And she said, car go fast, and the car went fast. It is so interesting how we think that that's a surprise. But in this book I read sometime, there's a gentleman there that was pretty good at delivering sermons. And the gentleman said, these things I do, ye shall do also. So what he was saying is, I have power. I have power that was submitted inside of my human form by God. And the things that I do, the miracles, the messages, the things that I do, the healing, you can do the same thing. So anybody right now under the sound of my voice who may not be feeling well, these things I do, ye shall do as well. We have the ability to heal ourselves from the inside out. So it really made me feel good because you know how the 16-year-old brain is. It really made me feel good that in that moment of crisis, she recognized the power that she has and she walked in it and she shifted and did everything I would want her to do in a situation like that. Well, that's what we have to do. We have to recognize the fact that when it's time for us to make these financial decisions, like Miss Patty said, we use our intuition. We use our intuitive mind. We use that something that tells us, because hear me, it is that same something that told you to become our business partner. It was that same something that told you to start getting on these calls. It was that same something that said, hey, I want to pursue this. I want to learn to be your own bank cash out strategy. I want to understand how to learn the skill set. So understand that you're already in the right place, doing the right thing for the right reasons. Now, having said that, I want to spend the rest of my time addressing this issue. Is your heart really in it? Is your heart really in it? Is your heart really in it? I remember my youngest daughter, the one I'm talking about right now, when she was in the 6th grade, she played basketball. 5th grade, 6th grade, did very well. Then in the 7th grade, she decided not to play anymore. So she came to me and she said this. She said, Dad, the reason why I played basketball is because my oldest daughter, my oldest sister played basketball, and you were always at her games, always at her practice, and you coached her. And then my middle daughter, you did the same thing for her. So I played basketball because I wanted to get the same attention that they were getting. But my heart really wasn't in it. I respect that. So she did not play 7th grade. So in 8th grade, guess what? She started missing it. So her heart, she started realizing her heart really does long for the game. And here we are, her going into her junior year, and she's still playing basketball. In fact, since y'all keep asking me about my kids, a prep school in Pennsylvania has given her an offer to come and be a part of their first girls basketball program. It's a national prep school, high school, based in Scotland, not Scotland, I don't remember, but yeah, Scotland, Pennsylvania, and they asked her to come and play. So all I'm saying is, when her heart wasn't in it, she quit. Now her heart is in it. So it makes a difference the way you perform. It makes a difference the way you show up. It makes a difference the way you cross your T's and dot your I's if your heart is in it. So what I'm asking all of you right now is to ask yourself this question. You've made a decision to pursue a skill set. You made a decision to put all the time and energy that you need to be able to learn how to do this. You made a decision to go into the academy and watch all of the relevant videos. You made a decision to take advantage of all of the expert coaching and mentoring that we have. You made a decision to get on the calls. You've made a decision to expose this information to people because you want them to be able to grow and expand just like you are. But ask yourself, is your heart really in it? The book of Proverbs, chapter 23, verse 7. The book of Proverbs, chapter 23, thank you for that, Miss Harvey, verse 7 says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Now, if you ever come on the radio shows, you know I quote that all the time. But the reason why I quote it so much is because it's such a great scripture, in my opinion, to recognize this distinction between our intellectual mind, the servant, and our intuitive mind, the gift. And oftentimes we operate too much in our servant and not in our gift. And that is one of the reasons why oftentimes when we're listening to this, when we're starting off, when we're beginners, when we hit a particular point, we have issues because we're operating in our thoughts. We're thinking about what we think. We're thinking about our opinion. When instead, if we just take ourselves out of the equation and know that we can spiritually connect to this movement, spiritually connect to the people that we're interacting with, spiritually connect to this skill set, it puts us in a better position of strength. I have a 10-minute meeting with my children every single day. And in this 10-minute meeting, we talk about trading. And in the first 2 minutes of the 10-minute meeting, I talk about the BYOB cash out strategy. Now, why would I be talking about the BYOB cash out strategy every single day? Well, I do it because I understand the power of repetition. And I understand that your conscious mind may be able to think about the steps. But when you deposit into your subconscious, when you're able to put it into your heart, when you're able to spiritualize it, when you're able to internalize it, it really becomes yours. And just like when my daughter had a crisis situation, and she was able to tap into that intuition to know what to do and to command that car to do what she wanted it to do, the same thing happens with this skill set. Sometimes you're in your, y'all say it all the time, you're in your own head. You're in your own head. You're in your own head. What do we do? What's the solution? That's the Miss Patty concept. What's the solution? The solution is to put yourself in a position of operating in your heart rather than in your mind. Operating in your heart rather than your mind. Now let's really break down this scripture. As a man thinketh. As a man thinketh. What do we think with? We think with our mind. As a man thinketh. But then it says in his heart. We don't think with our heart. What this scripture is really saying is that we have to have a blend between the two components of what makes us who we are. There's a particular concept that is called heart-mind coherence. Heart-mind coherence. And what heart-mind coherence is this. It explains the fact that your heart operates in a certain way and your mind operates in a certain way, but they're different. And this, the writer of Proverbs was wise enough to recognize that they're the same. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So whatever it is you're thinking about, wherever your heart is, those two things will come together and provide a coherence. And that coherence is what's going to put you in the best position. So you can watch as many videos as you want tonight. You can go to BYOB Challenge and have a marathon like it was Netflix. But if you're only watching the videos with your head, if you're only watching the videos with your mind, if you're only thinking about them, then you lose the ability to be the BYOB cash out strategy, to be the skill set, to be the wealth and abundance. I want to be evaluated by the Gleason report. So for me to be evaluated by the Gleason report, I need to connect my head and connect my heart. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. There's a new piece of science that's come out recently that begs the question, does your heart really send off a vibe or a vibration? You've heard me say many times in these calls, unless you're a beginner, what is your frequency? What is your vibration? We had an 8-part series on relationships. And every single one of those 8-part talk with the finance doctors, the solution to whatever was going on was always the same. Raise your vibration, raise your vibration, raise your vibration. Now, there is a particular type of medical device that is called an ECG. If I'm saying it wrong, medical people, you know what I'm talking about. It's the one that evaluates your heart. So when you go into the hospital facility and you have that done, the ECG, it's going to show the heart waves. And what happens is that is what is used to see if you have a heart murmur, to see if your heart's functioning correctly, if you have a myocardial infarction, which is a fancy way of saying a mild heart attack. They use those ECG, thank you, EKG. They use the EKGs to be able to see exactly what's going on with your heart. Now, they do the same thing for the brain, but it is, I believe, an EEG. Whatever it is, y'all are going to correct me, but the one that's for the brain has a different name. It's still an E and it's still a G, but it's something else in the middle. EEG, I believe. So when you do an EEG, it looks at the brain waves. For those of you that are new to this movement, you may not be aware that in 2008, the finance doctor had a brain tumor. And so in order for them to evaluate my brain before the brain surgery and evaluate my brain after the brain surgery, they use one of these, the EEG. So the EEG looks at the brain waves. The EKG looks at the heart waves. Now, what is your point, finance doctor? This is my point. There are studies that are being done right now that show that the EKG is actually a mechanism to reflect the vibration that a person is giving off. And let's talk about this term electromagnetism. Electromagnetism. You ever walk in a room and everybody just looks at you? That's magnetism. You ever been sitting in a room and somebody walks in and they just capture your attention? That's magnetism. You ever been listening to a speaker and they were boring as heck? Don't you put in the chat as you, oh, I'm doing it now. You listen to a speech and it's boring as heck, there's no magnetism there. You listen to a speech and it's outstanding and you feel it and you want to jump up and say, yeah, or doing praise and worship, there's magnetism. And think about this. If you're doing praise and worship and you're going through something and you put yourself a little bit down as about what you're going to, the magnetism of the moment makes you come up even higher. So your magnetism is higher than everybody else. So all I'm saying is that electromagnetism is a term that is used to describe the actual currents that are going back and forth. Let's really break it down for a second. What's the bare amount of the way in which we're structured? The atom. And what do atoms have outside the nucleus? Electrons. So there's always an electronic charge that's going on in every single component of us. Even if you go smaller and look at it on a quantum level, your ability to be able to move things and be able to make things happens on a quantum level. Let's go there for a second. So the way quantum physics works is this. There is a particle, okay? And a particle is basically just potential, because there's nothing there. It's just a dot. But then when you observe the particle, then it becomes a wave. And so quantum physicists have said that when they're looking at waves on a microscope, that they filmed the wave when they walked away. And when they walked away, it wasn't a wave anymore, it was a particle. But then when they looked at it, it became a particle. What does that mean? That means that whatever we give our attention to, it begins to move. As a man thinketh in his heart and mind, as a man thinketh, look at that, I'm adding to the scripture. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So literally, long before we invented quantum physics, long before we invented electromagnetism, these concepts were already broken down in the Word of God. Your heart and your thinking are connected. So I said all that to say this. Electromagnetism is the ability for these electrical charges that go throughout our world to have even more power. So am I the only person that's ever walked into a room and you were kind of excited, or you were moving pretty quickly and you made contact with someone and there was a shock and you said, "Oh, you shocked me." That's how y'all talk. "Oh, you shocked me." So what is that? That's the electromagnetism showing itself in that moment. Let's just think about electrical currents for a second. So none of you invented electricity, and you know energy is never created or destroyed. Energy's always been here. We've just been able to capture it and put it in certain mechanisms so we can use it. There's a switch right there. And that switch has potential energy. That's the particle. If I walk over there and I turn on that switch, boop, suddenly there's light. So it provides an opportunity for the electromagnetism to be activated simply by me turning on the switch. So when Dr. B asks you, is your heart in it? I'm asking you if you've turned on the switch. Now back to the study, this is what they discovered. They discovered that the brain waves on an EEG are 30% less than the heart waves of electromagnetism on an EKG, which means that the electromagnetism is in our heart. It's in our heart. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So the amount of electromagnetism is just a scientific way of talking about what we already knew. Because when the leader said to us, "These things I do, ye shall do as well," he was letting us know, walk in your power. So oftentimes when we do thinking, and that's all we do is think, we're not walking in our power, because the electromagnetism of the brain scan is far less than the electrical magnetism of the heart scan. So just like Albert Einstein said, we have to walk in our heart space. We have to walk in our God space. So when I ask you the question, is your heart really in it? How are you studying this skill set? How are you approaching this skill set? Are you trying to figure it out? Are you trying to think it out? Are you in your own head? Or instead, is it in your heart? Are you operating in your power? Are you operating your electromagnetism? Because the heart gives you the ability to be able to send off a vibe. I read an article distinctly this week, and the article said, do we give off bad vibes? Do we give off bad vibes? And the article discussed the way in which, the way a person's heart is vibrating at a certain point can be picked up by people in a close proximity. It can even be picked up by people on the telephone. It can be even picked up by people in the next room. You can feel their vibration. Now, I didn't write the article, but I wanted to write a letter to the author and say this. If the point of the article is that hearts have vibrations, why do we say, is it a bad vibe? Why didn't we say, is it a good vibe? People call me all the time and they say, hey, are you busy? And I say, yes, I'm available. Why don't we use our heart space to talk about somebody being busy? Why don't we use our heart space to talk about them being available? The baby didn't say, car, go slower, so it'll take me longer to get home and be safe when my dad's out of town. I'm driving this car. The baby said, car, drive faster, and it did it. So we're going to walk in our heart space. We have to be very deliberate about what we're saying. We've got to make our words be a reflection of our heart rather than our head. Is your heart in it? Are you in your heart? Are you operating in this skill set? Are you operating in this movement? Are you approaching this with the higher electromagnetism? The higher electromagnetism is in your heart, not your head. It's in your heart, not your head. It's in your heart, not your head. This just came down. This just got divinely downloaded. There's some of you who are listening to me and it makes sense and you hear what I'm saying. But you're dealing with the individual right now, who got on your nerve. And what you're doing is thinking about what they did. And you're thinking about what they said. But if you really are walking in the power of what we're talking about, we just want to understand where we are. We want to understand where we're going. Because when we start thinking about what people are doing and thinking about what we're saying and thinking about the mistake we made and thinking about what the person did, we block our heart space. Walk in your power. The power is in the electromagnetism. So that means everything that you do, everything that you say, everything that you experience, everything that you operate in, it should be from where the highest power is. And that's in the electromagnetism. Now there's a light right there. And the light right here is just one lamp. And I have to turn on that lamp manually. But the switch over here, it turns on 3 lights. So if I turn on that switch over there, it's going to light up the whole room. But if I turn on that one, it's only going to light up that one little area. So how many of you are making the decision by staying in your head to only turn on one little area? Ooh, child. How many of you are thinking and intellectualizing and using your head space, which has a lower electromagnetism based on the studies, when you instead could walk in your heart? As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Let's operate in our heart space. Let's put ourselves in a position where we really are connected electromagnetically to 6 figures in 6 months. Are you just thinking about it? Is it just an intellectual exercise, or are you operating in the gift? Are you operating? Because think about it, everybody's saying the same thing. The Bible, Jesus, Albert Einstein, the studies, it's all saying the same thing. Walk in your power. Walk in your power. Walk in your power. Is your heart really in it? Are you really in your heart? This is a wake-up call for you to begin to take advantage of this opportunity. How many times do you spend time thinking about what went wrong? Thinking about why that trade didn't work? Thinking about why you wouldn't be able to do this? Thinking about all the things in the way, when instead we could operate in our power. Are you busy? Yes, I'm available. Are you in your head? No, I'm in my heart, because that's where all the power is. This has been a talk with the finance doctor. Questions, comments, testimonies?
Powerful indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Bythewood.
You are very welcome, Miss Elizabeth Brownlee. I really appreciate you. Any other questions, comments, testimonies? Thank you, Ms. Harvey. That's sweet of you to say. So let me ask one more time, as we quickly review, that anytime we make financial decisions based on fear of what's going to happen, we're operating in our head. And anytime we make decisions based on our heart, based on our intuition, based on our spiritual inkling, based on something told me, we put ourselves in the position of doing the right thing, the right way, with the right power. So any other questions, comments, or testimonies? Is your heart in it? Are you in your heart? Questions, comments, testimonies? Excuse me. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we had a really good week. I really appreciate the way everybody has been so active and aggressive in our Trade Whisperers absence. That says a lot about us as a movement. And once again, we wish her the best in terms of speedy healing and recovery. And we're going to close this call and close this week. Let's tighten up our skill set around watching the Olympics. And you know, before I close, I'm so sorry. Let me say this. I was really impressed with something that the Olympian Simone Biles did today. Simone Biles is the African-American leader of the women's gymnastic team. And she's 21. And so, you know, being 21 is really pretty old for a gymnast, which is interesting because there's a gymnast in Belarus that's 46 that's in her last Olympics, but that's an anomaly. She's a freak of nature. So I said I'd have to say this. Simone Biles decided to pull out of certain events because of her mental health. And so often we're so attuned at only looking at the body and only evaluating the body. We hurt our body. We're so quick to want to go to the doctor, go to urgent care, get a trainer here, but we have to do the same with our mental health. And it really relates to what we're saying right now, because if we're operating in our heart and our heart is heavy or our heart is wounded, it affects us. It has more power. It has more electromagnetism. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So if we're having heaviness in our heart, it affects our performance. So I was so impressed with her that A, she was woman enough to pull out when she wasn't right. And B, that she was woman enough to say to the world, I'm pulling out because of my mental health. And so just shout out to Simone Biles for helping us to be real about what Yogi just said, that mental health is as important as physical health. And actually, I'll go deeper. Mental health is more important than physical health because your physical health is a reflection of your mental health. When you're feeling well, your body responds. When you're feeling bad, your body responds. So it's more important than physical health. Thank you for saying that. Okay, so thank you, everyone. And we're going to close this call out. Let me just give one more opportunity since I brought up some new data. Any questions, comments, testimonies? Okay, so we're going to close this call in prayer. There's an African proverb that says, any event begun or ended without the mention of God is maimed. So we certainly don't want to maim this event. So Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity for this group to get together, for the collective consciousness to show itself, for us to walk in our power, to use our high electromagnetism by walking in our heart, by understanding how important our intuition is, by walking in our spiritual power. We just thank you for allowing us this reminder. There's no new information, God. This is simply us being reminded of who we are and whose we are. Thank you for a good week. Please allow us to have a productive and restful weekend until we meet again next week. Thank you for this movement. Thank you for the members. Thank you for the leadership. Please bless every single family represented by the rectangles here. We are thankful, we are appreciative, and we are grateful. Amen. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this phone call. And we hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful Thursday evening and beyond. And this will officially end this call.